Hey everyone! In this video we're gonna take a look at how we can create a whoosh hit that sounds like this. Before we dive into the nitty-gritty of the production details and the sound design goodies, I want to tell you that I have created something for you. Whoosh hits are considered to be one of the more complicated sounds to create as a sound designer, and that's why I created this cheat sheet for you. It's a short PDF with bullet points for the different layers of the sound and the different sections of the sound for the whoosh, the transient, the body and the tail. A tool like this is great to have at your disposal when you create your own sounds, but it's also great to have when you start to layer up different samples from different samples packs in your track. So go ahead and download the free cheat sheet in the description and let's get back to create some sounds. Alright. So the sound itself is created out of 5 layers in this case. There are 2 whoosh layers, one sub whoosh and one whoosh wheat bag layer. So this sound, the sub layer sounds like this. And it's just a sub kick, the tail of that in reverse. That's what we hear. And the other layer here, the whoosh wheat bag, is from a session where I had a big oil barrel in the studio and I just did tons of recordings on it. And I pulled a ton of different stuff over it, like bags with wheat and my hands and different clothings and stuff, just to create a lot of different whoosh sounds because it has a really cool resonant vibe to it, that barrel. So this sounds like this. And together with the other layer, just brings out a bit more low-end energy just before the big hit or the big slam hits. So for the hit layers, there are 3 of them, and all of them are from a big metal drawer. And this is just all the boxes closing on the drawer. So I just recorded that in a lot of different ways, and then I have a little bit of pitch shift on them, or just lowered the pitch on some of them. So they sound like this. So they have that small whoosh leading into the transient and then really clean hit and a nice tail to them. So I really like the sound of them. And if we add them together, it sounds like this. Just a big mess. They are not really lined up. And I like to have the transient to be a bit flammy in a big hit like this, because it will extend the body and the transient of the sound. In this case, it's a bit too much, and you will see how I adjust for that later in the process. But together they all sound like this. So at this stage I was kind of happy with the starting point. I like the sound of those layers. So when I get to something that I feel is like a milestone in the process, then I just stop and resample that sound, and then I start over the process or try to test new stuff or go in new creative ways, because then I have a landing point or like a milestone where I'm like, this is good, so far I'm happy, and now let's see what we can do with it. So with that said, let's dive in and see how I process the sum of these layers. Okay, so as I said, I resampled those layers and I have that resample sound here. So this is just the sum of all of those layers, those 5. And it sounded like this. Bit messy, really flammy, and it's a really loud whoosh leading into the hit. And that's one thing to remember when you're creating whoosh hits. The whoosh is there to grab the attention of the listener, that something is gonna happen. Listen here, something is gonna happen. And depending on how you create that whoosh, it will grab that attention in different ways and cut through in different ways. But usually you want the whoosh to be quieter in volume than the transient of the hit. Because otherwise you will not perceive the hit as pretty loud. So it's always in comparison with the other stuff around it in the context of the sound. And in the isolated context of the sound, when you just have the whoosh hit, you need the whoosh to be quieter than the big hit. So those are two things that I think that we can address with just some simple editing. The too loud whoosh and the messy transient of the sound. So I just duplicated that sound and started to edit it. I duplicate it because I want to have that resampled sound to just go back to if I mess up something or I'm not happy or I'm not really sure. I can always go back and listen to how was it before, and I can always also just remove whatever and just start over. So I really like to have like stepping stones in the process, so I always can go back. This is like a safe place, and from that safe place I can go totally bananas and just test really weird stuff and feel safe that I always can go back. So just to remember how it sounded, it was like this. And with some editing, without any plugins or anything, it sounded like this afterwards. So a quieter whoosh, I just chopped it up and just lowered the volume of the whoosh. Nothing super crazy or wild. And what I did to the hit is I just edited out some of that flam. So, and now it's much cleaner and it's a lot lesser volume on the whoosh leading into the big hit. So once again I resampled that and started to process this sound. So let's check out how that's done. So here is the resampled sound. And I just started out with a little bit of tape saturation on the sound, just to glue it a little bit together, all the layers and the editing and everything, just to have it sit a bit together. So without any processing, it sounded like this. And with the Kramer tape, it sounds like this. Kind of subtle, no big differences. What will be a big difference is the reverb layers that come in now. I have both Valhalla Room and Valhalla Plate on this. So 2 sends or 2 return tracks. And the routing here is this goes in or sending into the room reverb and the plate reverb. And then the verb bus and the edited layer bus goes into this bus where I will do some additional processing later. But just check out the reverbs first. So the room is 2.75 milliseconds of decay, and I have the filter really low, so it makes this sound. It's just that deep reverb of it, and a lot of depth in it. I really like that. And what I did for the plate was I have Valhalla Plate first with a longer decay on the plate, 3.6 milliseconds instead. So 3.6 seconds, I'm sorry. And then I just rolled off everything above 1.4 kilohertz with Volcano 3, so it creates this sound. So it's another deep low reverb, and together they sound like this. One longer, one shorter, have a tiny bit different character to them, of course, but they complement each other really well, I think. So if we listen to the sound with the reverbs, it sounds like this. So nice, clean, nothing super crazy. So now I start to process the sum of those. And I start out with RX denoise. And this is a plugin used for voices, of course. To denoise a recording, you can learn the noise in the recording and you can remove it. But I use this in adaptive mode, and I use it to reduce the high-end information or the noisy information in the sound after the transient and the body of it. So with it, it sounds like this. And without it, so you can see the visuals here, just tames the high end and goes down really nice. And I really like the sound of that. After that, I have 2 OTTs in serial, but they are just processing the sound 24%. So with them engaged, it sounds like this. It just do what OTT does so well. It levelings the sound a little bit, adds more energy into it. It's just a super great plugin. After that, more compression. Also in parallel, but now 50% wet. And in this case, it's the supercharger. Sounds like this. Without. We have a bit of a volume difference there, of course. But it just extends the sound a bit with that aggressive compression, as you see here. And then there is a bit of K-clip. And this is kind of aggressive. 6.2 decibels of clipping is a lot. But I want to clip the sound, clip the pinnacle of the dynamic of the sound, because I want to extend the transient a bit. So when you clip it, you don't affect the transient of the sound that much, but you get a more boxy type of transient, which means it gets prolonged and you get more of a heavy feeling of it. And K-Clip 3 from Castrogue is awesome for this purpose. And after that, I just did a little bit of limiting to it. And once again, I felt that now I'm in a good place. I'm not done yet, but this is another milestone. So stop, resample it, and just continue from that. So next up is just the mastering of the sound. So once again, a resampled version of the sound that we have here. And you can see that I did some more editing to this. I chopped up the whoosh one more time, and it was because there was some stuff from one of the whoosh layers that I didn't really like the sound of, so I just wanted to edit that out. So I just chopped them up here and just edit that part out. It's that black part in the middle there. I didn't like that, so I just edited that, and then you have to adjust some volume and some fades in order to get everything to work. But it's a little bit of fiddling around, and then you get the hang of it. And then you can see some green buttons up here, and this is a cool feature in Reaper that I work in, where you can add plugins onto items itself. So what I did here is I wanted to remove the sub in the whoosh in order to have the real punch from the low end in the hit to really cut through. And once again, you have that contrast. If you don't have any sub first and then it hits you, then you will feel more of that. But if you have sub in the whoosh also, then you will have less of that. So I know that we have a sub layer from the main layers, and that will add energy, but I don't want that to add energy in the really low end. So everything under 60 Hz is just removed in the whoosh here. So without any processing, this layer sounds like this now. So it sounds good, but I just want to take it up one more level. And I started out with some EQ. This is just me notching out some stuff that I didn't really like and adding some stuff that I liked more or less. It's just by ear what I felt. Without. So it's cleaner, has more weight to it in my opinion, so I really like that. And then follows 2 more EQs. Those are really subtle. It's just more stuff that I just notch out, some stuff that I didn't really like, and a little bit more taming there. So with those 2 it sounds like this. And without them. So absolutely difference, not a super huge difference, but a difference. After that, some more K clipping. Now it's just to have it sit a bit more together and add that last bit of energy to it, but it's not that super aggressive at this stage. So it's around 1.5 decibels of clipping. And then I ran that whole sound into Elevate from Newfangled Audio. I really like this limiter. It's a multiband limiter, and it has these filter banks in it. So one bank is between 0 Hz and 102 Hz, and so on. You can see them down here. What this means is that the limiter will react different to different frequencies depending on what you send into it. Like a sound like this, it will probably limit more in the low end, since we have a lot of low end energy in it. But it's just, depending on what you send into it, it will limit those frequency ranges or filter banks, as Elevate says. Those filter banks that has most energy, it will limit most. So you can see it here. You can see this region here is limited more than the other regions. And it evens out the sound in a really nice way. So without the limiter and with. Really aggressive sounding. I really like it. One more thing that this plugin has is this transient emphasis. What this does is that it allows a little bit of the transient to go through before the limiter slams down on the sound. And that's the reason why I have one more limiter after this. Because otherwise, if I have this as my last limiter, and then I bounce out the sound at 0 dB, I will have digital clipping on it, and I don't want that, of course. So I have one more limiter after the Pro L with true peak limiting, just as a safety net, more or less. No big deal, but just last safety net of the sound. So with the last touch of processing, it sounds like this. So it's just a couple of dB there. And that is the final sound. We have it bounce down here. Punchy, heavy, cut through most stuff that you put in front of it. So yeah, that's about it for the hit. Alright, that's it for this tutorial. Don't forget to download your free cheat sheet about whoosh hits. The link is in the description. Thanks for watching, and see you in the next video.